Hi, my name is Robin Wong. I'm a photographer based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. In this video, I want to talk about why I love using the 50mm lens for street photography. Let's do this! Before we go further, let me acknowledge that lens choice is personal. My opinion is subjective. What works for me may or may not work for you. I love using the 50mm lens for my street photography. Feel free to choose whatever lens that works for you and your style of shooting. There are many focal lengths for street photography. There's the popular 35mm, there's the wide-angle 28mm, there's 40mm, and they're all different. For me, I just find that the 50mm works best for myself. I've actually shared my reasons why I love using the 50mm focal length for my street photography, but I've never made a specific topic. It was always mentioned in a lens review or comparison between different lenses. And I still get asked until today from emails, from comments, asking, "Hey Robin, why do you shoot with 50mm? Why don't you like the 40mm? Why don't you use something wider for street photography?" So I guess I'm making this one video to address this one particular question, why I love 50mm for my street photography, so that in case I get questions in the future, I can just throw this video link and that will be the answer to the future questions. Since I got this Nikon D600 camera, recently I joined an official Nikon Photowalk in Malaysia. I brought the D600 and this 50 f1.8D lens, and here are some shots that I took from that particular Photowalk session. Reason number one, tighter framing. Of all the popular focal lengths for street photography, 28mm, 35, 40, 50 is possibly the longest that people would use for street shooting. And I really like the longer focal length. It allows me to compose less in my shot. I can choose to exclude more, and I'm more selective with what I include in my framing. That actually results in much cleaner, more simpler compositions, and I like simplicity in my shots. I don't like to think too much. If I'm using the 35mm or even wider like the 28mm, I will have to fit a lot more within a frame. I have to be a lot more careful. I have to see the things, may it actually complement or distract from the main subject in that particular photograph. So with a tighter perspective, a 50mm lens, I can choose to have a simpler and more straight to the point composition. And to me, less is more. My reason number two why I love the 50mm lens is less perspective distortion. When you use wide-angle lens, if you tilt the lens up or a bit to the left, the straight lines get skewed, so the lines don't remain straight and everything looks a little bit out of proportion. I don't dislike perspective distortion. I think if you use it artistically, it can generate really good photographs, but for my street photography, my own preferences, I like my straight lines to be perfectly straight. I like things to look proportionate. I shoot a little bit of urban architecture. I shoot lines, patterns, and I really prefer my shots to have less perspective distortion. One way to control perspective distortion is to use a longer focal length, and I think that the 50mm lens just gives me the right amount of control to work with. Anything wider like 35 or 28 would introduce too much perspective distortion in my shot. There is someone cutting grass nearby. I hope the audio or the noise from the machine is not too distracting, but hey, the shoot goes on. Reason number three why I love the 50mm lens is more flattering look on portraits. I do a lot of people shots for my street shooting. I do street portraits. So when I go close to my subject, I like to do head and shoulder shots or even half body shots with a little bit of background for context. Using a longer focal length will result in a more flattering look. The head remains proportionate, the nose doesn't look too big, or the head is not too large for the body, it doesn't look comical, and everything just looks right. For me, the proportions, these are very important for portraits. I know some people don't care. They will use a 24mm wide angle lens, they go close to the person, and they snap the shot with a flash, fire on the eyes, and with all the harsh features on the face, the eyes, the nose exaggerated, the face is bent out of shape. I'm not into that kind of photography. When I shoot people, I want to make sure that they look good. And one way to make sure that they look good is to make sure they look proportionate and they look flattering. And a longer lens, like 50mm, can help me to achieve that. Since we're on the topic of shooting people, this brings us to the next reason why I love the 50mm lens. Reason number 4, working distance. I really like some distance between myself and the people that I'm shooting. Using a wide angle lens like 24mm or even 35mm, I have to go much closer, and sticking the lens on the person's nose is not really fun. Having more distance to work with using a longer lens, I have to step back a little bit, and having that personal space puts the person I'm shooting at ease. And it's very important because what makes a portrait work? The expression on the person's face and how that person looks at you and your camera. That's very important. So for me, if I want to get a really good looking portrait, I want to get really natural, really happy expression from the person that I'm shooting, I need to make sure that the person is comfortable. I need to make sure that I respect the person's personal space. And having that distance is important. I know some people will say that, but I'm using a 35mm lens or a wide angle lens. I just pretend I'm walking in front of the person. The person cannot see my camera, I'm hiding it, and I'm candidly shooting the person without the person knowing. Now I get a perfectly natural and untouched shot. Who are you kidding? Once you appear in front of the person notices you. You are a human being after all. You are not a trash can or you're not a lamppost. You are a human being. And you are carrying a camera, no matter how you hide it, the person knows. Just because the person doesn't react, it doesn't mean that your presence has not changed the way the person looks at you. There's no such thing as 100% candid portrait. Now, if you are going to be in that person's space, if you are going to appear in front of the person and take the photograph of that person, my only request is that you do it respectfully. By pretending that you're not there and by pretending that you are invisible, I don't know, I just think that it's ridiculous. Reason number 5 why I use 50mm lens is the compact size of the 50mm lens. Generally, a 50mm prime lens, I'm talking about the 50 f1.8 on any manufacturer, say from Canon, Nikon, Sony, anyone. The lens is usually very small, very light, and it's very easy to pair with any camera bodies. Now, pairing this 50mm on the D600 Nikon, it actually made this combo quite a small one to work with. Now imagine using a much larger lens, like say a zoom lens 24-70, that will make the combination a little bit too monstrous. So having a tiny lens to fit into even a large camera body, it makes it a lot more manageable. Oh, and not to mention, the 50 f1.8 or the nifty 50, it usually costs much less than other lenses. I got the Canon 50mm for like 100 ringgit or less than 25 US dollars, and for this Nikon it's like 150 ringgit, that's maybe 35 US dollars. Paying less, yet I get the results that I really like. What is there not to like? That's all I have to share about why I like using 50mm lens for my street photography. Hey, there's no right and wrong in photography. If you love 35mm, more power to you. If you prefer to use wide angle like the 28mm on a Ricoh GR3, then perfect. Use what works for you. I've seen many fantastic images from 35mm and 28mm lenses, or even 40mm lens. And 15mm is just one of the many choices and many tools available for us photographers to use. And I just really love the results that's coming out from this 50mm lens. I think they look fantastic, they look natural, there's less distortion, it flatters my portraits, the people portrait shots, and I think the lens is so nice to work with. It just works for me, right? And hey, you don't have to agree with me. Share with me your thoughts. Are you a 50mm shooter, or do you use other lenses for your own street photography? I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Let's have a discussion. If you have found my sharing beneficial, or if you've enjoyed looking at my photographs, please consider buying me a cup of coffee, or you can contribute directly to my PayPal. Links in the description below on how you can do that. Any small contribution will go a long way, will definitely help me to continue making more content and sharing about my photography and what works for me, and definitely more tips on shooting better photographs. Until the next one, please go out and take more photographs. Bye-bye.